you know, a friend of ours is taking on a new job from a giant enterprise to something still pretty good sized, but not quite as big. And he's going to be running engineering there.
That's a tough jump going, you know, a lot about a huge space, and now you need to know a lot about a small space. It's actually pretty intimidating. The other way around too, is going from a huge organization to a small, because everything is your fault now.
You've no idea how far away from the business outcomes you've been. It's going to be night and day for you. That's a really powerful and awesome thing. But at the same time, you also have to recognize that is an adjustment, right?
Welcome.
All right.
What episode is this? I forget. Like, I don't even count them.
Yeah, it's so many. It's 15. So many we don't even have to count anymore. It's fantastic. So
we should start doing that.
Right. Maybe. All right. So today, jumping right in, right? Today we're gonna have a kind of a fun little conversation. So, a friend of ours is taking on a new job, right? So he's been running big engineering shops in a massive company for a couple decades now. And now he's doing I'm going to go from a giant enterprise to something still pretty good sized, but not quite as big. And he's going to be running engineering there. Obviously I've made that jump. You've made similar jumps, and thinking about, maybe we'll just send him a little love letter here and kind of like, hey, here's our advice, anonymized. Obviously we're not going to name any names. Hopefully they'll know we're talking about them. But yeah, we just thought we'd lay out, our advice is pretty universal. I think probably if you're taking on a new leadership role in technology, there's a playbook that you can run, and thought we'd just talk through that a little bit. That sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. That's a tough jump going. It's a lot about a huge space, and now you need to know a lot about a small space. It's actually pretty intimidating. The other way around too, is going from a huge organization to a small, because everything is your fault now. Everything. Not just everything. Everything. It's a big difference there.
That's actually probably a great place to start, right? Like, one of the things that large enterprises inevitably do, they're machines at creating a diffusion of responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. Like, responsibility gets spread around. They don't do a good job of, generally speaking, large organizations of, kind of really narrowing in on accountability and all those different things. And there's always a reason.
Yeah, somebody's not doing something, just pick it up and do it, right? It's just, It's a natural thing. Somebody's not doing something, somebody else does it. It's now your responsibility.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, so as you go for that big company where, there's a lot of finger pointing, a lot of excuses and reasons for why things don't come. One of the best parts and worst parts, it's not really a downside, you just have to be aware of it, of going into a smaller company, is that you're much closer to the outcomes. And this is actually when I was talking to this guy and he was telling me about the new role, I was excited for him. And one of the first things I said was, you've no idea how far away from the business outcomes you've been, right? Because I know a little bit about his job, a little bit about his business, about where he sits in his organization. It's going to be night and day for you. And I think, and that's a really powerful and awesome thing. But at the same time, you also have to recognize that is an adjustment, right? Like, and I'll speak for myself. Like, when I left Bank of America, and I'd been there for over half a decade, and then I went into, become the VP of engineering at a Series C startup. We were about 100 people, 110. I think I was the 111th employee, and we were at 400 like 18 months later. Like, it was just massive scale up time. The biggest thing for me was I was used to being in this giant technology organization. Mm-hmm. GT&O at B of A, I think, was something like 140,000 people just in technology and operations, right? Like, giant organization. And I was so far removed from the business, and everything was about the infighting and navigating the organization around you. Whereas, we landed in Passport and you were there, right? Like, it's all about the business outcomes. Like, nobody cares about the organizational stuff. I mean, even to its detriment, I would say, but like, it was a huge adjustment for me going through that of understanding, okay, cool, I have to completely change the way that I approach the organization.
Yeah, you go from that scale to a startup where one person actually is a observable percentage change, whereas one person going into an enterprise, it's a drop in an ocean. But that one person at a startup can make all the difference. It's a new role that they don't have already. That's a new responsibility that's not there, or like it's this task has been dropped over and over again because we just don't have time for it. Hire somebody; they're not doing the task. It makes a measurable difference when you have somebody added to a startup, and you can feel it. You know, it's not just like a tasks are getting done. You know when that person is there or not. When they're off on PTO, well, the jobs don't get done. It's not like it just gets absorbed by another organization, another person.
Yeah.
There's just no capacity to do those things. And so there's a big difference when you go in, even, you know, from when we took the jump in full time here, is that everything is on you to do, is to make sure it gets done. And that's the same thing going from a mega corp to, you know, medium corp, is you have to know the full scope of everything in the engineering shop, whereas you didn't have to before because it just wasn't, you know, in your purview to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the way I like to say that, right, is there is no cavalry, right? Like you are the cavalry. Like there's nobody coming
to save you.
It's like, if we don't do it, it doesn't get done, to your point, right? Like it's a very kind of frontiersman sort of thing. If you don't build a shelter, your family freezes to death, right? Like, and so it's the same thing with your team and your company, and you have to just think through those things. So if we get a little practical, right? Like, you know, a lot of the advice you would give to someone starting a new job, a lot of it's the same. But there are some differences too, right? Like, you know, I would take some time, sit down and write some stuff down, right? Like write down, you know, fundamentally what you want to do is you're going to be constantly in this cycle of, you need to learn a lot, right? Like you need the first few weeks is just going to be absorb as much as you can. You want to learn the team, the architecture, the roadmap, what business commitments are, how does your business work? How do you make money? Where are the challenges with making money? What are the commitments your has been made to your board or your investors? Like where are the risks? Like you need to understand those things as a technology leader, because you're not a technology leader anymore. You're a business leader.
You're more into the business than you think.
Yeah, exactly. And so like you have to understand all those things. So first thing, learn. You're going to learn like crazy. Next, you need to start to assess all of those things, right? Especially the things that are your responsibility, the team, the architecture, the product roadmap to some degree. Every organization is a little different on how they make those decisions. But as a VP of engineering, you need to be bought in on the decisions that are being made from a roadmap and strategic standpoint. And if you aren't, you need to make your reservations known, and you need to have those conversations and get to unity.
You have to have an opinion about everything, because everything is going to impact the team in some sense or other. It's a smaller organization, so not seeing what's coming down the pipe will totally hamstring you. You won't know how to pivot, or you'll be pivoting so hard that all of your technology roadmap will just go poof because you're too caught up in just catching up with the priorities coming in. You know, you won't be able to think 2 steps ahead because you're just still trying to fix the mistakes that you've already made. And getting into those decisions, seeing what's coming in, will help you get see around those corners. It's the stupid terminology, but it's reality.
You always say you every time you say see around the corner, you're like, oh, I hate that I just said that, but you can't help it.
Yes, it's there, and I've said it I think twice in the last couple of weeks. But it's a good analogy though, is being able to look at what's coming down in front of you. Your team, what's going to affect your team? How do you layer in some things that you want to do as part of those initiatives instead of trying to separate those, integrate them?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I agree with all that, right? And you have to, so you go, you do the learn and then assess. You need to assess your team, right? So you need to, your team, the architecture, the roadmap, like where are your problems, right? Like what's the talent level on your team? Like these are kind of brutal questions to ask, but the thing is, you have fresh eyes, and those will disappear. Fresh eyes are very, very, very valuable. And so like we even talk about it with people that are joining the team that we know we have a lot of respect for, that might be joining our team. And we're like, I'm very excited to get fresh eyes on what we're doing. Not because I think they're smarter or know more or whatever, but like fresh eyes is a very, very valuable thing. Use it. It's actually one of the most important reasons to get a new leader in the door. Because if you're just going to absorb and do what the team's always been doing, what's the point of a new leader? They could have just kept doing the same thing. So you have fresh eyes, use them, assess things, be critical but constructive, right? So like really do the scouting report on your own team. This is my assessment. This is, this person's good at this. They're not good at that. This organization's good at this. They're not good at that.
But you've got to be honest, though.
Strong here.
You got to be honest about these things. You can't just come in and say, well, they're okay, and just ignore it. You've got to have the brutal honesty, not just with the person, but also of yourself. Am I evaluating this person fairly? Are my are my biases in check there? Because you might have a bias against a certain technology or against a certain technology. That person's really good at one thing, not really good about what you think they should be good at. Can you use that to both of your advantage to grow? And so I've seen people say, well, they're not good at X, so they're bad. What, are they good at Y? Are they good at this? Can they learn? What's their learning ability there? And so keep a clear perspective on not just the team members, but yourself, to make sure that you are evaluating fairly and honestly, and you're not letting any previous history blind you from seeing what is really in front of you, so that you're evaluating your team fairly.
Yeah. Well, and fairly is super important, but also like, where are you going versus where you're at? Right. And to be fair, like, to be clear, right? Like, we're not saying, oh, you should draw a line and decide these people aren't good enough and just fire them. That's not the point of what we're talking about. What we're trying to say is, in that moment, when you are fresh to the situation, you can come in without, you're bringing your own personal biases, sure, but you're not bringing the bias of history of that organization. So you get to come at it from a somewhat clean sheet of paper and evaluate, where are we at? Not like, and this was actually going back to Passport days, right? That was something that I did, various levels of success, right? But it was evaluating things. But one of the things I remember when we started doing that, and we got really systematic about it and started to start slotting people into levels and things like that. And it caused a lot of churn in the organization because, and you tell me if you think I'm saying this fairly, because you were there as well, right? Like, I think that there were people that felt like their prior contributions should be reflected more in the assessment of where they were, right? And it was one of those things that we navigated very stickily. We got through it. But like, that was always one of those things where it's like, I get it. That's an emotional feeling there, and maybe you should be, but like, there's a difference between an assessment of where you're at and how the organization, like, sort of honors the work that you've done. Like, those aren't the same thing. And you've got to figure out a way to manage the human element of that.
It's also, people will say, well, they work really hard. They try really hard. And, they're not quite, they won't acknowledge that there's a technical gap, but they work really hard. So, they deserve to be where they are because they work hard. Well, we're talking about outcomes here, not, they try hard, they work hard. Yeah, somebody could burn 70 hours a week, but that's not an assessment of somebody's skill levels or technical skills. That's an assessment of their, how long they can work. Are you assessing somebody on running a marathon or a sprint? They're two different things that you look at. So somebody can run really fast, but they couldn't run a marathon, or vice versa. It's looking at the reality.
Or ultimately, all you care about is the miles, right? Like, it's like, oh, this person can run, or maybe you only care about the miles per hour. That's all that actually matters. Depends on the outcome that you're looking for, right? Like, effort is a prerequisite for success at a minimum. There's a minimum level effort that's a prerequisite for success. But at some point, effort is no longer, it's all diminishing returns if you don't have the skill to properly apply said effort.
Yeah, I mean, sure, they run a marathon, but it took them a week to do so. That doesn't matter. Yeah. You need to be able to finish that in a reasonable amount of time. But I think something that I've noticed too is that there's certain individuals who will get a predetermined notion on somebody and a snap judgment, and then that person then freezes in time for that skill. But I think that's a disservice to both of the individuals. It's clearly a disservice to the individual being assessed, but also the assessor could potentially be losing out on some very skilled people because they say, nope, you're not good, moving on, and that's it. and never give that person a second look.
And decide if I want to engage with that one. But
I mean, I get it. So I get it. So I do understand why, though, because I think there's a barrier of I've been correct enough times, so I'm going to assume I'm correct all the time.
Yeah.
But
no, so I was teasing. I will engage with that. Like I think we've
that was bait.
we do know people, right? Like some people are very information based, and some people are very instinctual, right? And or their instincts, they would argue their instincts are information based, but they're very, to your point. There's two different ways to look at people, right? Like you can say I'm constantly reevaluating based upon the latest information, and kind of maybe even with a little bit of a recency bias. Doesn't have to be recency bias. You could be balanced, or you could be somebody that says, "Hey, I'm going to get a certain amount of information that I need, and then I'm going to make a decision, and then that decision is going to take so much overwhelming information to ever get me to reconsider it that it's essentially locked in stone." Right? I think there's a place for both. I mean, I think everybody's different. I certainly have known people that have done it both ways. And I don't necessarily have a way to say one way is more successful as a leader, because I've seen people be very successful doing it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I have counseled the people that do things in the more, call it fixed mindset, to be slightly more open-minded. I have done that. But to your point, go ahead.
To be fair on that, though, I get why somebody would do it that way, because it could take a lot of effort to change your mind. And if history proves that it has not paid off, well, okay, sure. There's effort in reassessing people over time, right? If that takes you, an extra just hypothetical month of time, but by not reassessing, by moving on, you can move faster and make more decisions that way. You can win that way too. I'm not saying there's a specific thing wrong with it, but it's not a one size fits all solution. It's very situational after plenty of experience doing that and being right over time. That's the place to use it, not initially.
I think the more sophisticated way of doing that, if you are that person who's very kind of intuitive and judging and that's it, I think the more sophisticated thing is not necessarily to become somebody that is constantly reevaluating, but is also to say, okay, maybe you evaluate for something different, right? Like, and I remember talking to a friend of mine who'd taken over, had a product at a bank, and kind of a mid-sized bank, and he was talking about one of the big challenges that he was going through was kind of putting everyone into a binary good and not good box, right? And what he was switching into was more of an understanding is like, okay, what are they good at, right? Like, yes, there's sort of this elite box that I kind of put people that think are elite in, at, like good at everything or can, kind of put into any situation and they'll be successful. But the reality is most people aren't that, right? Most people are good in their area of expertise, or they're good in a certain thing. If you put them in the right situation, they can provide value. And so as a leader, your job is to say, okay, cool. Maybe I've got to, if I got to, statistically speaking, if you got a team of 100 people, just use big round numbers, right? You maybe have 5 to 10 A players if you're a good place, another 10 to 20 B players. And then the rest is kind of in the middle fat of the curve where they're, they're good enough to keep around, but not good enough to fire, or not bad enough, saying that badly, not bad enough to fire, good enough to keep around, but never going to really excel. But you have to figure out how to leverage that. Like the idea is like, oh, we're only going to have A players here. I've not seen that ever work at scale. You can do that in a small organization. It doesn't work. You have a range of talent, and you have to figure out how to put people in a situation to be successful and to get the best value out of that person. And I think that's a big part of that assessment, right? Like you assess the team and you say, okay, how are we organized? What's the skill level? What are we, who's being optimized, capitalized on, whatever the right word you want to use is, who's being leveraged the best and who isn't, and what are ways to get more value from people? Can we reorganize things? Can we assign people from, maybe this person's on ops and they should be doing dev work. Maybe this person should be doing cloud work, whatever. So you start to do some of those things, and then you move on to the assessment of the architecture as well. Right. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like, you made a great point. Don't bring your biases too strongly, right? Like if you walk into a place and you're a Microsoft guy and they're a Java shop or they're a open source shop, just in general, like, don't be like, oh, we got to change it to this because like, don't bring that. That's not going to, and vice versa, right? Like you walk into a .NET shop, if you're an open source guy, like your first step should not be like, well, we got to replace all this. Like that's just a bad decision. That's an ego's decision. It just doesn't make sense. So you have to look at it and like build the map of your organization, of your architecture, understand what's working, what isn't, look at the cost structure, look at the hosting, the infrastructure, all those different things. And then you make your assessments about, and then you make your decisions about what do you need to change, if anything. And I think we've talked about it before. Don't do a full rewrite. It's almost never a good idea. Never a good idea. If you need to start changing the architecture, do it one little tiny piece at a time. And just slowly rewrite. What's the ship of Thesis, I think it is, or cities or whatever. The ship that gets like the mythical thing where like they rebuild the ship over time. So every little piece eventually gets changed.
Yeah. Eventually you have a new ship.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's how you have to do it. Don't do a full rewrite. It's just a terrible idea. You almost like 99.7% of the time. It's not the right move.
No, it's people have tried that. We've seen people try that. They tried to rebuild the whole thing. All right. Well, it's more complicated than that too, is that rebuild the thing into the new thing. And it's that abstract because, like, well, what is in this? You have a whole new team. What's the requirements here? Why are we doing this? And so there's a lot of context that's missing there that you might get something, but it's most certainly not going to be the first thing that you had. It's just, you're boiling the ocean for another buzzword bingo going on here.
No, it's good. So, okay. So we said it. Learn, assess, now plan, right? Like plan, you know, and I would say your learn and assess, you get 30, maybe 60 days. I would not take longer than that to do before you need to start coming up with plans and you say, okay, what are we going to try to change? And I would plan against 3 different horizons. I would say over the next month, over the next quarter, over the next year. Or if you wanted to go just quarters and then year and then multi-year, that would work too. And just say, okay, hey, like, here's the things that I think we need, the adjustments we need to make. It should not be, here's the 50 things wrong with you people that we need to, in order to become a big boy shop, we have to go do this. It's not that. It's saying, okay, we're good at this. We can be better at this. Here's, pick 2 or 3 things at a time to slowly start to make incremental improvements. You need early wins. Early wins are really important.
Yes.
You need to demonstrate value.
An early win is better than an early easy win is better than a late big win every time. You've got to get the history, but also as part of building up trust with your business partners and building trust with your teams to see that you're winning. You're not going to push them to something that is going to be a full rebuild. It's that those wins, those little wins add up to a big win over time.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's really, keep your eyes out for that as you walk into the job the first time. Like, look around for the low-hanging fruit that other people don't see, or that there's just been a vacuum that's causing a vacuum in leadership to cause it to not happen. Like, look around for those things where you're like, well, that's a stupid problem. I could kill that in 10 minutes. Let me just do that. Right. Like, now, obviously you want to make sure you get the right stuff and all those different things, but you should be on the lookout for those. You need 2 or 3 of those in the first 90 days to be able to really, to your point, you want to build credibility with 3 main constituents, right? Maybe 4. Your team, your boss, whoever your boss is, the CEO, CTO, whatever, your partners, right? Business partners, whatever. And then your boss's bosses, the board, the leadership, all those different things. You need to build credibility and rapport and relationship with all those people as soon as possible, right? Because that's how you actually can understand what's going on and you can make the right decisions. And that because people will actually tell you what's really going on if they trust you and you have credibility. Otherwise, they just don't tell you and you don't know.
I think with some of those, you only have about 30 days to win them over. Longer than that, you're sunk. If you can't win over any one of those 3 in the first 30 days, you might as well pack it in. You're sunk. If you can alienate the team early, it's going to take a long time to get them back on your side. And if you can't get them to trust you, you've lost them. Same thing with your boss. If their boss can't trust you to get these things, you're done. You're sunk. So it's trying really hard out of the gate to be on everybody's side because you're in the middle of a lot of things. You're the kind of the centerpiece of delivering the business value. The team is your tool to do so. The business is the one paying for it. Got to make everybody happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I agree with you. I also think it's okay to upset some people. You just got to do it intelligently. But I do agree. Like if I look back on the situations,
I said they don't trust you though. That's my point. They don't have to like you, but they have to trust you.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I think if I look back on it, like the 30 to 45, if you can't win somebody over in 45 days, you're going to struggle to do it. I think that's a fair statement, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I look back on the times that I've, been successful or not, like, yeah, either people give you a shot and they're like, all right. And then you build trust over time or not. My relationship, trajectory with people, it tends to be a kind of a bit of a check marks curve, but because I'm like, well, let me, I've had a tendency in my life to, let me see if I can push and find where the boundary is with you. Right. Like I'm going to upset you. I'm going to do something that upsets you. And then I'm going to slowly build the credibility back up and there'll be a larger amount of time. I've managed to over time make that a little bit less painful, but it still can kind of happen. But I think that's all fair. I think there's the other thing on the value piece, right? Like it's no different than some of the other conversations we've had. Like ultimately your job is to ship value. And as the leader, your output is the team's output, right? So you got to look for what are the places that is inhibiting the flow of the work out of your team and or the quality or whatever it is, right? Whatever's bringing down the outcome out of your team, I think is a key thing. And then the other thing I would say is like, write some of this stuff down, like build yourself a 30, 60, 90-day PowerPoint that you share with your boss and maybe even your leaders. I think that, some of this, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. These are the people I'm going to talk to. Map the organization, right? Like this is something I've done for whenever I take over a new organization, I will sit down ahead of time, but then I also do this for my leaders. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if you and I have ever done one of these explicitly, but where we sit down and like, let's talk through the org chart of the whole of everything that matters to us. Right. And we're going to talk about our relationship to that organization. And this is more of a big company thing because those can be really complicated and like the politics of it all. But you need to do that for yourself. And then you also need your team. You need your team to give you context and also to then, if they have an unhealthy relationship with any of those organizations, for you to help them solve that. Right. Mm-hmm. And all those different things.
Those are landmines. Those are the landmines you have to know about before you step in them. Because if you start to try to partner with somebody who has a history of challenging the person in your role or your team in a negative way, that's going to blow up in your face easily. Yeah.
Especially if you don't know. If you don't, you have to kind of be aware and understand who are the people you can sort of trust, who are the people that you have to like document everything with, and who is going to follow through on what they say they're going to do, who's not. It's like, who can you rely on and not? Those things are all important as you come into a new organization. You don't have any of that context, and especially if you've been somewhere for 2 decades, you've built up so much context in your head that like you don't even have to think about these things, but now you have to think about them. And so it's like, sit down, write them down. It'll help you. It's useful to get those thoughts out. And then I think the last part that I would call out is like, you really need to, both for yourself and with others, define success. Like, what does success look like in the role, right? So within your team, how does your team define success? How does your boss define success? How does the board define success? Right. And generally speaking, it's how do you help them be successful? Like that's what success looks like. And so you have to figure out, okay, the CEO needs to get revenue and profitability to whatever this thing is. And, my job is to, reduce this cost and help support this revenue growth or whatever. Right. And so, but understanding those things and call it out, right? Like for yourself, for your team. It's like what we talked about with the charter. Previously, and I mean, this is also, by the way, a great time to do a charter. You're new, like let's get the team to tell you what they do and why they do it and how they do it. It's a great excuse to get a lot of information. But then what I'd say is, the success criteria, that's always the hardest part of the charter. It's the hardest part of this stuff. nobody usually wants to do it. They just want to dive in and start doing the job. I'm telling you, as someone who has gone through a very, very messy disconnect on success criteria with their leadership, it is the highest leverage thing you can do is make sure that that is very clearly understood up and down the chain, and there's no ambiguity about what that means. That will allow everybody to be in unity around what the priorities are and how we're going to measure them and how we're going to say whether or not we're doing a good job. So that's mostly what I had. I don't know. You got anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I've said my piece there, but I think one thing that we don't really pitch enough here is that improving the self-improvement part of things. I think being in an enterprise space for so long, we forget some of the basics of being maybe a better leader, a better individual, a better peer to somebody. Not that you were doing a poor job by any stretch of the imagination, but it's good to get back in those reps of picking up some of the classics, right? Pick up some new leadership books, pick up something else that would refresh you on maybe some things that you've been taking for granted. I still have, a huge stack behind me that I do pick up every now and again just to keep myself fresh. And so
it's a good call.
I mean, that's never a bad thing. Never a bad thing just to pick up something.
For this job,
stream ownership.
Role. Stream ownership. What else?
The dichotomy is good.
Okay.
I like the dichotomy of leadership. That's a good one. Because it's if it sands down the things that were maybe sharp in the first one. What's your third?
I wasn't going to say that. I said my third. So I would say extreme ownership is a good one for that transition from, call it the nanny state corporation, where there's so much is taken care of, to now you have to be that individualist, within the company and really, be the cavalry. It's a good primer for that. I think to your point also, to be more empathetic and to be more kind of in that small, close-knit team, I think something like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People can be really useful to help, again, reorient to that type of a mentality. And then it's from a management standpoint, High Output Management by Andy Grove is still like the thing in terms of, because if you're coming into a new job like this, you're thinking about systems, you're thinking about, the patterns of what's going on. He really, for those of you that know, it's kind of like the precursor to OKRs. One of his sort of disciples designed OKRs based on a lot of the ideas that he put together, I think in the 90s. He was a big deal at Intel when they were killing it, when they were like the most successful company in the world. And so there's some really good stuff in there that's just like basics about management, about thinking about things that I recommend to everybody. So those would probably be, for this context, those would probably be the 3 that come to mind. But I'm sure if I turned around and looked, I'd think of, oh yeah, this one too, and this one too as well. But
yeah, it's easy too. It's the ownership skills, but it's the communication skills. Find where there's a gap in communication. This is going to be much more important to be speaking up to board level C-suite than any time before. And so specific words matter to a lot more than they used to. You don't have the umbrella that you would before.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, this is great. Well, to our specific friend who is taking on this new role soon, congratulations. We love you. Good luck. Enjoy the ride. And to anybody else who's also going through this, to taking on that type of challenge, that type of transition, it's awesome. It's a great fun time. It's hard. You'll work super hard, but the first year that I made that transition year, for me was some of the most fun I've ever had working. So like, it was a great time, and, met a lot of really great people in that process, yourself included. A lot of my favorite people in the world, kind of from being in that type of an environment. So, have fun. So
good luck.
Yep. Good luck. All right. Take care, guys. Thanks, Jay.
See ya.
That's a wrap for this episode of Tech Council, brought to you by DevGrid. Thanks for joining us as we dive into building smarter solutions for the enterprise. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, leave us a rating, and share your thoughts on X, at DevGrid Inc., or at devgrid.io. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore more ways to thrive in the enterprise. Until then, keep building.